we target nutrition. From there, we target stress. I don't even get into the movement portion because I understand that often when you are in chronic pain, your stress levels are going to be much higher because you're stressed about your pain. So I have to figure out what you're doing in your life and how that's going to help you. When it comes to nutrition, pretty much everybody's on an anti inflammatory diet across the board. And that's because inflammation makes your pain worse.
Welcome back to the Holistic OBGYN podcast, everybody. My name is Nathan Riley. I'm an OBGYN, board certified. Got all the diplomas sitting in a box somewhere to prove it. If you need to work with me for anything in my podcast or anywhere appeals to you, go to belovedholistics.com. You're listening to the Holistic OBGYN podcast. I also have a clinically focused podcast called the OB-GYN Wino, which I recently rebooted. You can find either of my podcasts on any of the platforms where you find your podcast. My guest today is Berrion Berry, who is she has a ton of training from functional nutrition to fertility awareness educator. What's very unique about her is that there are not a lot of Black women in this space speaking the way that Berrion does. Berrion is a beautiful Black educated woman who is going to toe the line, as do I, around radical responsibility and what is and not in your control when it comes to women's health from the standpoint of hormones, fertility awareness tracking. Her specialty is fertility, and you can pursue her work and find her on all of I'll include a whole bunch of links here in the podcast description. Berrion is one of those people who can riff on virtually everything when it comes down to hormones and the gut and a variety of women's health issues. And I wanted to bring her on to talk a little bit about, some of the truths that you're seeking around not just women's health, but also Black women's health, specifically if you're on this fertility journey, or even if you just have like a glimmer in your eye that you want to have kids someday. It's really, really helpful to start getting some of your upstream health issues, especially if they're contributing to a fertility challenge, to get some of that stuff dialed in. And this isn't just like a rich white person's conversation, which is why Berrion and I actually get into some racial stuff as well on her podcast when I was a guest, as well as on my podcast today, in this conversation that you're about to hear. So, Berrion is she's a breath of fresh air. You can find her podcast, which is Happily Hormonal, spelled HORMONEL. That also happens to be the URL for her website if you want to join her private circle and get some direct support from her. Her name is spelled, by the way, Berrion, last name Berry. She's a women's health coach and fertility awareness educator. We'll get into that conversation in a second. I want to give a shout out to our show sponsor, which is The Medicine. They produce a product called Immune Intel AHCC. It's extremely well researched to help with a variety of health issues. And there are some very, very recent studies, in vivo studies, with women who have had HPV ongoing for 2 years, picked up with the signaling detection swab by your OBGYN. They tell you, hey, most of it can go away, but now you might also be at risk for cervical cancer. There's a whole bunch of confusing stuff out there. One of the creators of this product, Mimi Lindquist, and I came up with this recently launched this program called Clear and Free, where we talk about a variety of health related issues and how your immune system, nervous system, and your gut, and all of the environmental factors that you may be swimming in on a daily basis can contribute to persistent HPV and to ultimately the abnormal cells in your cervix that can lead, for some women, fortunately it's a small number, to cervical cancer. And we put all of that into our program, Clear and Free. And this product, Immune Intel AHCC, is so beneficial for these types of issues that we're including a bottle free, which is about a $90 value, when you enroll in Clear and Free. So if you need information on that, clearhpv.com is where you go. But yeah, this product, it works by boosting up the T cells and NK cells in your body that are responsible for scavenging precancerous cells, as well as really defending you from, or helping you integrate the message of these little viral particles, these little viral messengers that we pick up on a daily basis, given that they outnumber us probably 150, if not more, to 1. So by boosting these cells, boosting the interconnectivity within these, within your immune system, you're going to get a decreased systemic inflammation, which is already a sign. Like you're less puffy, you have more energy, or better sleep, you wake up feeling more energized. That's already a sign you're on the right path. Taking a bottle of this every 3 to 4 months is a part of my regimen that is a little bit costly, of course. But if you're dealing with HPV or abnormal PAPs or whatever, taking a bottle of this while working with Mimi and I through Clear and Free is going to provide you with a lifetime of reassurance that you don't have to actually worry about this. And you don't have to go broke on like $1,500 worth of supplements when you go to the naturopath who says they're a functional medicine practitioner, but they're just ordering labs and then dumping a bunch of supplements on you and getting a commission when you purchase. That's not an approach that I like to take, because I don't think, first off, not everybody can afford that. I can't even afford that. But frankly, it doesn't work. It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if any of the strands stick. So Clear and Free is where it's at. We include a bottle of Immune Intel, and the in vivo trials of women who have taken this product and seen their HPV disappear after like battling this for years and years and years it's astounding, which is why I've kept them on as the only sponsor of the podcast for now. So if you want to try this out, not ready for Clear and Free, that's totally fine. But remember that these supplements don't work in isolation. But if you do want to try this, you feel like you've got everything else dialed in, go to themedicine.com, themedicin.com/products, use code beloved10, and you'll save yourself 10%. There's a reason I've kept them on as a sponsor, because their product actually works. It's really, 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 really good, if not great. So go and check them out. Thank you, Immune Intel, for continuing to support the podcast here, which I work so hard on. Guys, the host of the Happily Hormonal Show, fertility awareness educator, Berrion Berry, is here. You're going to love this one. If you have any questions or comments, please find her or myself on Instagram at Nathan Riley OBGYN. Leave us some comments, ask some questions. If anything from the show touches you, share it with your friends. It's the only way to get this podcast out to the people that need to hear it. And lastly, I'll say, if you haven't left us a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, they call it, or on Spotify, please do. It really, really helps, more than you know. As the listener, whenever you tell Apple Podcasts that you're loving what we're doing with 5 stars, it boosts us up. It makes it more available on more platforms. It becomes more accessible. You wouldn't know that as a listener, but I'm telling you, as a podcast host now for several years, it really matters. And if you've already done that, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I really have fun doing this. And the fact that you spent an hour with me every week or so listening to one of these interviews really, really means a lot. So thank you. And here's my guest today, Berrion Berry, fertility awareness educator. Berrion Berry. This kind of sounds like that could be the name of your podcast. If you were like really into berries, you could call it like Berry on Berries, and you could talk about a berry or something every single episode.
So I am. I love berries, and I feel like I've finally grown into my name because I finally discovered the power of berries. Like I didn't know until probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I'm like, I finally grew into my name. So I
Why
get it.
why berries? Like, what tell me about that. I eat a lot of black and blueberries because I know
Yeah,
they're good
the
for me, but, like
antioxidant levels. I mean, when you
okay.
think about our antioxidants and what the body needs at a cellular level and the amount of stress we're all walking around with. Like,
Mm.
oxidative stress is just at an all-time high, but we need our antioxidants to kind of pair with it so the free radicals stay in check.
Yeah, us men, I know you do a lot of fertility work, and,
Mhm.
a lot of women are carrying this burden of getting pregnant, and their
Mhm.
partners, meanwhile, have, like they've got low sperm counts, they've got low motility. Even if those come up, you still have to worry about the oxidative stress and fragmenting the DNA, which is gonna ultimately be carried to the egg, and then they build a baby. So if you're not worrying about the impacts of oxidative stress, I think we're missing a big part of that. So in your coaching, if you were to say, "Hey, we're gonna start doing a smoothie," what would you put in your daily smoothie?
A cup of wild blueberries,
Mm.
probably 1.5 cups. If you want it, like, more liquidy and refreshing, I would go with, like, about 1.5 cups of coconut water, but if you like something that's a little bit more thick and creamy, I would do probably 1.5 cups of whatever plant milk or raw milk. I know some people are on the raw milk thing. It hasn't hit me yet. I don't know if it will. It's just where I live, and I have not gone out of my way to go get raw milk, but whatever milk, and then maybe your protein source, a protein powder, or maybe some more berries. I would keep it really
Just load it
simple
up.
at first. Yeah, keep it
Yeah.
really simple at first and then build into it. I think we often feel pressured to have a lot of supplementation, a lot of vitamins and minerals outside of what's actually in the earth, which is questionable now, but start with the basics and then build upon it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for those who don't know you, Berrien, that sounds delicious, by the way. I could go for a smoothie right now. For those who don't know you, you are very humble about your sort of education and your training, and I think all of this comes through the lens of somebody who you've had your own health issues, you've had to go in deep in your own toolkit to take care of yourself. So you do some integrative health coaching, you are a functional nutritionist, you're also a fertility awareness educator. You kind of have the perfect combination of things in order to help people probably just get their health in order. And of course,
Mhm.
getting pregnant is a reflection that you're doing okay from a hormonal and a health standpoint. So, so where do we begin? I guess I'd love to eventually get into your, 6 important hormones to consider. I think you did a really good job of that, but we can go a little bit deeper into that. But before we do, a lot of my listeners struggle to find practitioners in the space that look like them. And for those who
Mhm.
aren't watching on our YouTube channel, Berrien, you're black, you're a black woman, and,
Mhm.
there are not too many black women who are doing this depth of health coaching. So, for the women who come to me and they're like, "Yeah," they're maybe not super trustful of the system, or there's a bunch of, like, people who don't look like them who are giving them advice. You are a black woman, you are highly
Mhm.
educated, you are, kind of like a no nonsense kind of
Yeah,
person from what I've gathered.
yeah.
How do we talk about race in this conundrum that is getting healthy in a country where we have more resources than we even know what to do with?
I think the first step is to, like I teach people in general, whenever I'm navigating a tough conversation, acknowledge what is. We know there's racial disparity. We know systemic racism exists. Accept it for what it is. It's bullshit. Excuse my language, but it is what it is. But then take action in changing it, whether that looks like taking radical responsibility and taking your health and your healing into your own hands or advocating for yourself. I think a lot of people like to talk about problems but not provide solution, and I'm a very solution oriented person, a little bit of a Virgo rising in there. So
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
to have solutions, but I also think that, when you acknowledge things, accept it, and then take action toward actually changing it, not just talking about changing it, but truly changing it, you feel better. And I think that's how we navigate the race discussion when it comes to our health. We know that Black women, for instance, Black people in general are dealing with an obesity epidemic, for instance. We know that to be true through and through in our space. What are we doing to change that? How are we
Right.
improving it? I'm
Right.
personally having Thanksgiving dinner at my house. I'm not cooking, my mom is, but she also knows that that means she's gonna be working with some different flour as opposed to what she's used to. She knows I like my fresh ingredients, so, I'm in charge of the sides except for the greens. So I think that's you find a healthy balance, you navigate it with grace, but you accept it for what it is and you take action towards changing it.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good time to insert, and this goes for anybody of any color, any background, any what it doesn't matter what's in your bank accounts. You can either show up as the victim of your circumstances, or you can say, okay, I got these circumstances. Now what?
Mm,
And, I shared with you quite a bit from this recent South Africa trip on your podcast recently. Guys, if you haven't found Berrion's podcast, it's like now one of the staples of the programs that I'm going to be recommending to my clients and
thank
my community. The Happily Hormonal Show. It's spelled a little funny because you use the phonetic, uh, etymologic spelling, HORMONEL show. Um, so on your podcast, I was sharing that the South African women in these villages who have initiated into the Sangoma traditions, which is what the white colonizers would have called witchcraft, I mean, essentially.
Mhm,
They were pretty blunt with us about this sort of victim mentality that people have in the United States around whatever the thing is to be upset about, du jour, and they specifically mentioned race. Like, you were gifted with the ability to engage with your community, to organize with the intellect, with beauty, with power, and you're not using any of it because you're stuck in this victim mentality. And yeah, all of this stuff that has happened to us, you can look at it like that, or has it happened in such a way that here we are and now we have the sovereignty in our decision making in order to make something better for ourselves. So the first thing that I think is going to come to mind is, let me also start by saying most people in medicine talk about race and they look at education, they look at income, and they correctly point out that a relatively well-off Black woman has roughly the same statistics, and a lot worse health outcomes in general than an uneducated, relatively disenfranchised white woman. So
mhm.
they'd say, "You can talk about race all you want, but it's a matter of education and income." And frankly, I don't actually think that that's sufficient. I actually think we need to consider what is the chronic stress through the lens of the Black experience in the United States, but also even white people haven't really seemed to be willing to take accountability for their actions and the outcomes of those decisions. So, from a health coaching standpoint, how do we get around this conversation of it needs to be, you need to be going to the most expensive stores, buying the most expensive food. Otherwise, your health is going to fall apart. Because I'm not seeing that actually happen in reality, anyways.
Yeah, so I think the first thing, especially with I'm going to be honest with you, when I found out the new tax bracket situation that switched up, that they're rolling out for the 2024, I was like, bro, what are we doing? Because I'm just thinking about the difference in the way you live when you make $40,000 a year versus how you live at 80,000 versus a 100,000 and beyond, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we're going to strip it down, let's put if I was talking to someone who was maybe making minimum wage and they were trying to get their hormones together, the first 4 things they would do: proper hydration, so actually making sure you are hydrating your body throughout the day, not just with water, but with other things that are gonna nourish your body. Remineralization of the body, so making sure that you do have access to certain nutrients. So, like, vitamin D is one of those things where, as Black people, we don't get enough of it, right?
Tell me more
But we
about
all
that.
need it.
Tell me about that. Why is vitamin D such a problem within the
Our
melanated
pigment.
population? Yeah.
It comes back down to pigment and us not being able to absorb it, but it's also a hormone, so our body does make it, but we need the right things to help make it, right? So let's say vitamin D, like, if you could only buy one thing, it would be vitamin D. But if you can't buy that, look at the food that you are consuming, which takes me to my third point of nutrition optimization, and the fourth point being nervous system regulation. Now, this
Mm,
might seem very overarching, but the reason I say it like this is because I think we hyperfixate on getting to the gym and, paying for that gym membership. And like I heard someone say they pay $200 a month for their gym membership. And I was like, whoa, that's wild. I was like mind blown because for me, yes, I have a gym membership, but also I'm in the best shape of my life when I go for a walk every single day and I hit the trail running and maybe do a few body weight exercises. That's free.
yeah,
That's not gonna cost me a lot. When it comes to nutrition, yes, it can certainly get very pricey, and I'm not going to act like it doesn't, and I'm not going to ignore the fact that there are food deserts out there. There's so many, but I also know that if I say to somebody who maybe doesn't have a lot of time, "I want you to Roy G. Biv your plate." They're gonna be like, "Roy G. Biv, like the rainbow?" Yes, I want you to do that, and I also want you to make sure you're getting high quality protein if you can. If you can. If you can't, I get it. If you're doing like a fried bologna sandwich, which I really understand that some people are in that position, that that's I'm sorry, but also add an apple. An apple is gonna
yeah,
do a lot for your liver that you maybe don't even realize. Those
right,
old
right.
wives' tales, right? That an apple a day keeps the doctor away. These little things really are going to make the biggest difference. It's a foundation. So, like I said, like if I were to strip it all down, I would go to those 4 areas and figure out one thing I can do every single day just to get me started, just to roll the ball, because from there you can kind of magnify everything. You can like hyperfixate if you want. You don't have to. I certainly don't. When I was at the start of my healing journey, recovering from burnout and HPA access dysregulation, like that whole situation, when I was
You
starting
need
there,
both.
I was paying so much money to my naturopath and then to have to buy all the supplements just to start my own healing education and realize I didn't have to go through all of that. I didn't have
Yeah,
to fork over that much if I didn't want to. So, yeah.
yeah.
I just said a lot, I know.
No, no, it's brilliant. The way that you speak, like I said, I every time a person comes on the podcast, I actually ask them, "What are 3 interviews you've done, that you're really proud of?" And I, through that, ended up finding more and more and more of your content. I was like, "Man, she has such a beautiful way of articulating some of these things." And
Thank
and
you.
I think it's really important to impress upon people that, like, we in the United States are way behind. Like to be healthy, you do not need to have every biohacking trick and every device in your house and to be only shopping at Whole Foods. In fact, for you, it might just be you need to drink a little bit more water. And heck, maybe squeeze, even if it's a non-organic lemon, just squeeze some lemon into your water or add an apple. Go get a bushel of like
Mhm.
gala apples at the store for $5 and just add one of those per day. This is not a matter of like suddenly overnight you're gonna become perfect, and those
Mhm.
health issues that you're suffering from took years, if not decades, to develop. It's gonna take years or decades to get you back on track. But if you don't do anything, and we can blame everybody else out there, if you can't add like a vegetable to your plate, there's very little that I can do for you. There's very, very little I can do if your hemoglobin A1C is 13. We're not even gonna look at any of the other fancy stuff until we cut out just some simple carbohydrates from your breakfast every morning. It has to come by way of baby steps. And so if we came out guns blazing and said, here are the 10 things you have to do to be healthy, most of us are going to be lost. It just isn't that simple.
I would
But
never wanna do it. To
yeah,
be
nobody
honest
wants
with
to
you,
do it.
nobody wants to like, when they talk about neuroplasticity and, like, rewiring your brain and all those
Yeah.
different things,
Yeah.
you know what I've learned about myself? And I'm somebody who loves change. I hate change. I hate change. Like, in my head, I'm all about change. Change my behavior, improve my life. They always say in order to get something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. But so many of us are not willing to do the things we've never done. And we're constantly ending up with results that we don't like. Well, if you truly want a different outcome, let this be your call to change what you're doing. And don't even think of it as like a bad change. Just do a little makeover, a little filter, a little zhuzh.
Yeah, a
You're
little
good to
something,
go.
something. A little
Just a little
zhuzh.
something.
What do you why do you think it is that so many people are so resistant to change? We're gonna get into the hormones, but weight loss is
Mhm.
actually a big part of this. Like, I don't really care how much you weigh. I wanna make sure you're healthy. In fact, I would take an overweight person based on their BMI who's regularly moving and eating as well as their money can allow them. I'd take them as a client, a home birth client, over somebody who's sort of genetically thin, and they're spending 4 hours a day in the gym, so they're ripped, but they're never sleeping, and their diet's kind of falling apart. This weight thing is tricky to talk about, but from a hormonal standpoint, being a little bit having extra fat, let's say, extra adipose tissue can lead to disruption, specifically in your estrogen and how that's metabolized. How do you approach that conversation as a coach? You know, I think we're all kind of coaches, but,
Yeah.
um, how do you approach the conversation around weight loss?
Well, I'm very honest with my clients up front. And I think most people know when they come to me, they are not coming for a cakewalk. They're coming for the truth in the truth, right? That accountability. They're happy. So I think I'm very blessed that people don't come to me to be coddled. They come to me
Yeah,
for transformation. So I'm just direct about it. Like, listen, we need to get this weight in order, and the reason we want to do this is so that we're able to do that. So I
yeah,
like to explain, if you want X outcome, let's say for instance you have a really heavy menstrual bleed and you want a lighter bleed, but you're also overweight. I need us to work on managing your weight because that's going to help us decrease those estrogen levels. And as we're decreasing those estrogen levels, often what we'll find is your bleed is a little bit lighter. So I try to make it a little bit more sexy and explaining why we are doing what we are doing, but also acknowledging that maybe you're not comfortable or maybe you're not ready yet. But when you are ready, I'll lead you to where you need to go. I'll guide you. I will link arms with people and explain to them that in order to get this result, we have to address this issue. In my community, like, it's so funny. I am the tiniest person in my family. You know, everyone always laughs at me. They're like, "You have no butt." Listen, not all of us can walk around like my mom. Like, we all can't have that butt. Like, okay? But I'm also the only woman in my family specifically that was a collegiate athlete at one point in time, that trained through certain things. So, like, I didn't get the same curves in development. Like, we got a little shape coming in. I'm almost 30, so we got a little hip spreading. But I also utilize that when I'm working with my clients to speak to me, also acknowledging that I don't look like the same. Uh, I don't have the same fat on my body as most women. So it's easy for my hormones to be in this happy state because I never had that excess fat. And that's how I approach it. I just tell them the truth. I think when you lead with integrity and in truth, you get amazing results through and
yeah.
through.
You know, you brought up being a collegiate athlete. That means that you were working pretty hard, in middle school, even in high school, probably,
Mhm.
at the track, or were you a track and field competitor? What
Yeah,
was your
I ran my freshman year of college and soon after retired. I told people I am retiring from because it's taxing on the body. So I
Yeah,
started track when I was in 3rd grade. So however old you are in 3rd grade, that's when we found out I was good. But when I was in middle school, I was also a basketball player, volleyball player, a soccer player. I was always active, right? So when we first started talking, we were talking about 4 pillars, and I said nervous system regulation, moving
mm,
your body every single day. I literally was moving nonstop from the
nonstop.
time. from the
Yeah.
time I was, like, what, 8 until the time I was 19, moving nonstop.
Wow.
So now the physique that I have at 29, oh, I'm really excited. I'm gonna be 30 in February, okay? I'm excited.
Hey.
I'm so excited, but the physique I have now is a result of how I lived when I was younger. It was a result of constantly moving my body, and notice I didn't say I was in the gym. I didn't lift a weight until I was 18 years old, and by the time I was lifting weights, I was like, "What am I doing?" Like, so awkward in my body because I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
only that, but I was on birth control, like, I was on hormonal birth control my freshman year of college, and I was a collegiate athlete, so I wasn't even performing the way that I would have ideally liked to perform. Now, in hindsight, I still got the wind, I'm still feeling good, but I also get to speak to why I look the way that I do too.
Yeah.
I like to
Yeah.
explain why my hormones are happy, and it's because
Mm.
I'm not focusing in on the same things, and I'm also very intentional about living in sync with my cycle, which is like that's really how I got started in all this. I don't think you know that, but yeah, that's
No,
where I
I don't.
started.
I don't,
Mhm.
but I can reflect as well. I mean, I was competing competing, I don't even think as kids, you don't even feel like it's competition. You're, like, out there having fun, and you're running your
Mhm.
ass off on the soccer field, on the lacrosse field. I used to play hockey. It was pretty constant. Then I started lifting weights, and it was like I programmed myself, in such a way that now I'm almost 40 and I still have the leanness, I still have the abs and everything, like, it just is a part of way of programming myself, but on the other hand, had I kept up with that, like, had you not retired your freshman year, you may have actually run yourself into the ground. So before we get into those 7 important hormones, tell me a little bit about maybe what the downsides of being addicted to this, stay active lifestyle. And maybe you could just look at it through the lens of some of the clients you've helped who are sort of addicted to exercise for the sake of trying to look like Berrion Berry,
Yeah.
but actually they're harming themselves maybe from that HPA axis dysfunction standpoint.
I think, I'm one of the clients I'm thinking about is the one who lost her period,
Oh yeah.
then developed PCOS, then struggled for about 2 years to actually conceive. So
Mm,
not to be extreme, but when you live an overly active lifestyle, more often than not, what I see happen is one, women are losing their periods. And I'm going to speak to the girls or people with periods. Also, if I say the girls, please don't be offended, friends. Like, I'm just a girl's girl. Okay. It's nothing personal. It's just how I am. But if you have a period, no, I'm speaking to you. So, with that being said, it was the loss of the period because the testosterone, the androgens, the cortisol was so high that the body actually didn't feel safe, even though it was.
that's
But
right.
when
Yeah.
you're overtraining and then couple in undernourishing, which is another thing that women have a tendency to do, it's either one of two extremes. We either are undernourishing and not eating enough food, or we're overeating, right? But there's no healthy balance in there. That led to the androgen-based PCOS. The androgen-based PCOS led to the irregular periods, which led to the issues with actually conceiving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what happens when you're overactive. Now, there's a slew of other things, but I'm thinking about one client in particular, and her baby girl is the most beautiful little thing I have ever seen. And I'm so happy she has her daughter now. But just thinking about her story, I'm like, gosh, because she thought she was doing everything right. She's like, "Barry, I'm doing high intensity interval training every single day. I don't know what's going on with my body. I got diagnosed with PCOS. I don't know what to do. I don't want to be on birth control." Okay.
A lot. Yeah.
Do you feel anxious? Because I feel anxious listening to her talk. Like imagine how you feel listening to
That's
this.
right.
That's very high energy. So that's just throwing out hormonal imbalance. And, you know, there you have it. That's what I see when people are overactive or addicted to the active lifestyle.
Yeah, I have a good friend who was maybe 300 pounds. Before I met him, he was in Wall Street. He's actually a verifiable billionaire right now. And um, he started working with a personal trainer and lost a lot of weight real fast. He became obsessed with exercise. Like he was in New York City and he would climb 60 floors to get to his job in the morning, and great. Like he lost all the weight. But then again, he went from, as a friend of mine, actually another coach, Paul Chek, he put it, you went from soggy bread to burnt toast. And it's that somewhere in the middle, that balance that really leads to, real harmony, like real holistic harmony, whereby you actually feel well, you perform well, you're speaking to others well, you're able to connect because you're allowing, yourself to rest and recover to match this tremendous, um, stress that you're putting on your body in order to make it bigger, stronger, faster. So when we even talk about weight, I think it's really critical for people to remember. And actually, I'll have clients who come to me where I'm like, okay, you're overweight. I'm going to tell you to stop exercising for 3 months and I want you to just sleep. And once
Mhm.
we get you sleeping, now we're getting some better balance between cortisol and insulin and your thyroid and your gonads. Everything's starting to work now. It wants to get back there. But if you're already in a state of inflammation and you're hypercortisolemic, meaning you're pushing your adrenals to go, go, go all the time, exercising actually is not going to do you any good. It's actually going to potentially lead to more harm. So this is where the nuance of an experienced health coach like you comes into play. And I'm really, really grateful that we're having this conversation because it's not just go out there and get it. You're not a 26-year-old, lean 6'1" guy running around in the woods right now, only eating goji berries and grass-fed bone marrow. Like
Yeah.
you might actually have a family, you might have other responsibilities. If you do nothing else, sleep, of course, is critical. And when you're feeling motivated and rested and your blood sugars are better under control, that's whenever even if you're using an HRV monitor, that's whenever your body's going to feel like I'm ready to go and push it a little bit.
Mhm.
We have this obsession, right, with exercise, as if exercising is the sort of the holy grail, and I think it must be balanced with other forms of nourishment.
For sure. I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the things I've recently leaned into, especially over the summer, is I was very fascinated. Are you familiar with the blue zones?
Yeah, yeah. Dan Buettner wrote that book. Yeah, he's got a
Love
show
his
now.
Yeah, I love his work so much, but I found it so interesting that the people who were living the longest in the world were enjoying their wine
Hmm.
and like gardening, farming. And then I looked over at, specifically, I was like, Sardinia, okay, let's look at them. We love that. And then I was like, but why am I so connected to like Asian culture and like Asian inspired food? What is it about that? And then I'm like, oh, I found another blue zone. Okay, what are these people doing?
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
enjoying community and farming their land. So you mean to tell me that longevity lies in community, nourishment, and movement? And,
yeah,
I can speak to this from a very, it kind of seems like very simple as I'm saying this, but, after years of studying and going through these certification programs and listening to this person and studying under that person, after all of this time, you mean to tell me I just have to eat right, move my body, rest well, basically? That's it? That's the key? Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
there's
That's
like
it.
but when you think about our culture right here in America, there's no money in that.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's also tainted the way in which people approach weight loss. Like, what is the name of that fad thing people are obsessed with right now? Oh, Ozempic. Is that what
Oh,
Ozempic?
Ozempic. Yeah, it's a medication, very expensive medication for weight loss. It's insane. Yeah.
Listen, all I know is the name of it made me uncomfortable. And then, like, I'm one of those people where, like, if you can't pronounce it, maybe stay away from it a little bit, just like a little bit. But when I saw how many people were like obsessed with it, these weight loss transformations, and then a few months later, it was like, this is being banned or they're getting rid of this. And I'm like, y'all, all y'all had to do was eat, move, and rest. We didn't even have to
Yeah.
go that deep with it. Like, you could have saved a few $1,000s, but I mean, it is what it is. So yeah, I think that the weight part of discussion is very difficult for people to talk about. And also, women specifically don't understand the relationship between estrogen and cortisol in weight gain. And so a lot of women are not in their feminine. They're very like in their
Yeah.
masculine,
Yeah. Yeah.
anxiety, control, cortisol,
Mm.
estrogen imbalance.
Mm.
And so I have to kind of think about who I'm talking to and the best way to deliver things sometimes where I'm like, okay, I know you want this, or I know you're feeling that, but I need you to understand your physiology really quick. So here's your lesson in physiology. Now that we've got that, this is what we can do. What do you want to do? And
Right.
just presenting it like that, people seem to be so open to it. They're like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
feel safe now." And if as
Yeah.
long as you feel safe in your body, I can do my job in supporting you on your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we have so many things working against us that have nothing to do with diet and movement and everything else. There's these stories we tell ourselves, that really kind of set a very shaky foundation.
Mm.
Um, I wish I looked like that person, or I wish I was this or that. It's like sometimes you just gotta like own what you've got and and then to establish what is your goal. If your goal is to live the longest, being in the CrossFit gym for 10 hours a week and on all these supplements and all this other stuff is probably not actually the way to live the longest. So let's just be very clear. You want to be bigger, stronger, and faster than your neighbor. Great. That's going to be a completely different conversation. If you want to be less anxious and be more present and have more time, then maybe we're not spending more time in the gym and we're actually focusing on some breathing and nervous system balancing with your kids and with your wife, like whatever. There's just so many different ways to go about this. Um, but let's take a little 45-degree turn. Let's say you've
Okay.
mentioned a couple hormones. I think it's helpful for people to understand what we're talking about here. We've mentioned estrogen, cortisol, we've mentioned insulin, we mentioned the thyroid. Progesterone, of course, is going to come up. What are the other two? And then if you could just kind of walk us through each of these and let us know maybe where you would, mm, yeah, why don't you just take this for however you want to present it without us going too much into the weeds?
Listen, I'm really good at just scratching a surface. Like, I'll scratch the itch of hormonal communication, but I think the first place to start is to clarify what hormones are. Okay. We know they're there, but what are they really? They're the chemical messengers of the body. They're going to tell your body how to work and twerk at the end of the day. Men have hormones too. I don't know why men don't think they have hormones, but you have hormones too. Okay. So I think that's important to say. The best way to think of hormones and the hormones I'll be sharing is really as a language. And once you can understand the language of hormones, you can pretty much do whatever you need to do in whatever direction. So I am not the person who created this, and I really wish I could remember this woman's name, but there's this concept called hormonal hierarchy, where when we're dealing with these 7 specific hormones, cortisol, insulin, progesterone, testosterone, um, did I say estrogen yet? No, I don't
I'm
think I
not
said
sure.
estrogen.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Estrogen, your thyroid hormone, and then your melatonin. There's, like, levels to it. Some people like to kind of shape it like a pyramid this way, but I like to shape it this way.
Like an upside down triangle, upside
Yeah,
down pyramid. Okay.
because for me, when it comes to balancing, quote unquote, I don't really like the concept of balancing hormones because they don't actually balance like at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at it from this lens of cortisol and insulin are like right next to each other. And then we have our next layer of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And there's some pretty important hormones that I'm not mentioning right now, just kind of the big ones. Then you have your thyroid hormones, then you have your melatonin. You can then think about how to balance these. We start with melatonin. We start with sleep.
Go figure.
Okay. And then we go to our thyroid hormones, our T3 and our T4. So now we're looking at our metabolic hormones and our metabolic health. But hey, maybe it's as simple as making sure I'm eating the right foods in the right amounts and feeling really energized throughout my day. Then you have your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, which for me, they're all on the same playing field. I don't put one above another. Estrogen does like to act out, but so does testosterone. And both of those, if they're not in check, can deplete your progesterone levels. So I put them all on the same playing field. And then we have your cortisol and your insulin. Now, your cortisol and your insulin, cortisol is the HBIC, insulin is like her lady in waiting. I have to
They
I'm a
go
very
together.
visual person. Now for
Yeah.
those of you who are not visual and you're like, "No, I need, like, the particulars," right? So I want you to think of I mean, yes, cortisol is our stress hormone, but another way to really think of cortisol is just straight up your fight or flight response more than
Keeps you
anything. Your
alive.
cort
Critical to
That's it.
keep.
It keeps you alive, and we keep it there. I don't wanna go any further than that because we can talk about the negative feedback loop and blah, blah. That's too much. So
Yeah.
cortisol. Insulin is your hormone that is gonna regulate your blood sugar levels. A lot of women who are dealing with hormonal imbalance also have an insulin resistance and a sensitivity. So, what we want to be doing is making sure we're regulating our blood sugar levels and not eating things that are super high in sugar. And like, I mean processed sugar. So, cortisol, insulin. Then is your estrogen, your testosterone, and your progesterone. Estrogen, she's our emotion. She's how we feel good. She is literally why we have a shape, ladies, like why we're built different, okay? But she's also the reason why sometimes when she's not in check, our skin is breaking out,
Mm.
why our periods can be heavier than we would actually like them to be, why they're lasting longer than we want them to last. Your progesterone, girl, that's your sexy hormone, okay? It is what makes you feel very relaxed when we have enough of it. But a lot of women are estrogen dominant and progesterone almost deficient, basically, where there's no progesterone left because cortisol, when she's not in check, is utilizing up the progesterone and it's increasing your estrogen and using that, right? And then testosterone. Yes, we know testosterone as like the man hormone, and we love testosterone if we're men, but as women, we don't want too much of it. But we also need your testosterone for your libido, for your brain health, your cognitive health, which is a big part of your hormones, which blows my mind. People don't talk about that enough. But I'm not a brain surgeon. And then your T3, your T4. Your thyroid hormones are something that I always struggle to talk about because people don't like my take on your thyroid hormones and your like hyperthyroidism. I think it's just because I'm super tiny. People don't want to hear what I have to say about that. I think that like if I were somebody that had this massive weight loss transformation, people would listen to me more
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
talk about that. But because I don't have it, you can't relate. You're right. But also, it's metabolism, it's your energy, it's your temperature, and the way your body really regulates itself and its homeostasis. And then we have our melatonin, which is our sleep and our wake cycle hormone. And what I love about melatonin is the fact that it is underrated. It's the fact that people don't think about getting sleep. But when I tell you, go take a nap, you feel so much better. Why do you think we have
Yeah.
kids on a
Yeah.
sleep schedule?
Yeah. Well, it's not marketable, of course, right? Because it's like, I mean, frankly, from endometriosis to fertility issues to injuries to God knows what, if you go home and you sleep 9 hours for a week, you're not even gonna wanna hire me anymore because 'cause you're gonna feel like everything got better. But it's not like, it's free, guys. Just go and do
Take a
it. I
nap.
don't care what it takes. get more sleep. And it might mean you sleep in a different room from your partner for just a week and just see how you feel. If
I
that
do.
like yeah, well, that's because
I
you're responsible.
Well, so when women are in their late luteal phase, leading to their bleed, right? We know for a fact that our basal body temperature is increased. It's just a little science, right? We
Yeah,
know that to be true, but also we get really hot at times when our hormones aren't balanced. And then our partners being in bed with us, like the tossing, the turning, the restless leg syndrome, like, bro, if you don't go away. So sometimes I will actually just look at my boyfriend and be like, hey, babe, I'm going to go sleep in another room. Nothing
yeah,
against you. My sleep is sacred. And
yeah.
that's like a conversation in my house. And he's just like, "Oh, let me look at your app." So he already knows where I'm at in my cycle.
No.
Like he knows, but I think it's important that other people know it's okay to value your sleep and your sleep hygiene. So many problems are solved when we sleep. We have a
Yeah,
3-year-old where I can always tell when it's nap time because her like behavior gets very unruly and she never wants to go down for her nap now. But every day at about 12:30 when we have her, I'm like, "Hey, sweetie, it's time for your nap. You sure? Yeah, you're gonna feel so much
yeah.
better when you wake up." She gets up from her nap and I'm like, "My baby's back." Like, "Yay!" Like, "I
Yeah,
like you." And like
yeah,
I communicate that to her so she understands the importance at an early age of actually getting deep sleep or
yeah.
feeling well rested.
Yeah. How do you what am I trying to ask here? Well, let's actually in order to give some context for what I'm going to say, let's go to the fertility awareness part of what you do. Um,
Yeah.
Women are gifted, to steal from Lisa Hendrickson Jack's book, The Fifth Vital Sign. You guys are gifted with 13, roughly 13 bleeds per year.
Mhm.
And we have ad nauseum talked about the menstrual cycle on the podcast. But guys, Berrion mentioned the luteal phase. That's the part between the ovulation and bleeding. And then you've got menstruation, and then you've got your follicular phase, which is between bleeding and ovulating. And this thing just keeps going as long as you're healthy until the axis, these feedback loops kind of stop doing that. And that's what we call menopause, right? So
Mhm.
that's a gross oversimplification, but of all of the techniques that people use, they go with the LH strips, which, by the way, guys, it's a waste of your money. Don't do that. Do the basal body temperature and cervical fluid. That's actually, between those two, I get a really, really good handle, and maybe some other like symptomatic things for what's happening in your cycle. But man, empowering somebody with the gift of learning how to chart these types of things is really, really important. And they suddenly like don't really need you anymore, which for me is a great gift. Like, you now know
Mm.
everything you need to know about your cycle and what we can do to modify it using Kayla Osterhoff's program. Her biorhythm is really, really lovely for that, like how to eat and how to sleep, and maybe your activity levels during different phases. But one thing that keeps coming up for me that I haven't found a consistent way of really addressing
Okay.
is, let's say that a person is tracking their cervical fluid, right? They're doing all the things that you want them to do, but they're not seeing the egg white consistency.
Yeah.
They might even still be ovulating,
Mhm.
perhaps. It's a little bit hard to say sometimes, but let's say that they're getting that rise in basal body temperature just after the egg is released. We know they're ovulating, but for some reason their cervical mucus just isn't a consistently consistent with egg whites. How do you approach that as a fertility awareness educator? Because this is coming up a lot for me, and I'm not sure if it's just that maybe they're calling it something else, but it actually is egg white. But I do believe
Mhm.
some people are not seeing the changes to their cervical mucus. Can you educate me, and maybe other people listening would be I don't know, maybe they would be able to help clarify this a little bit for themselves. Hey guys, it's Nathan. Sorry for this brief interruption, but I got to tell you about a new offering that I'm going to be making available this fall. You've heard about the Born Free method. That's our comprehensive pregnancy and postpartum program. Includes 12 months of weekly calls, 100 plus video modules, tons of citations around pregnancy and postpartum. Well, Born Free is an umbrella under which there's going to be a lot of other courses. And the second course in this anthology is called Clear and Free, Your Solution to Persistent HPV. It's a collaborative effort between me and Mimi Lindquist of the Medicine Podcast. She is a relative expert in, I say relative because I don't consider anybody a full expert in anything, but Mimi has gone deep into human papillomavirus and some of the ways that we can use lifestyle to augment the immune system in hopes that your routine screening for HPV or your routine pap smears are going to come up negative and clear, so you can go another 3 to 5 years and not even think about it until your next appointment, whereby hopefully you'll screen negative again. So the typical path that many women experience of all ages in their OBGYN clinic is, hey, you're due for a pap smear and we're going to test for HPV as well. If one of those comes back abnormal, your OBGYN is going to say, oh, darn it, it's abnormal. Why don't you come back for a repeat screening in 6 months or 12 months? And this process continues, right, until you end up with either a progression of abnormal cells in the cervix caught on pap smear or a persistence of human papillomavirus, meaning your body has not been able to integrate the message of this virus, right? Remember, viruses are not living things. So in the meantime, your OB/GYN or your midwife or nurse practitioner hasn't given you any tools in order to help support your immune system through diet, through movement, through sleep, through stress management, through hydration, through all of those modifiable lifestyle factors, so that you can be sure that if you had an HPV positive screen initially, that the next time it's going to be negative. Now, the other part of that conversation, of course, is, hey, I got the HPV vaccine. Aren't I safe now? Well, the problem with Gardasil 9, which is the primary vaccine that is offered to young men and women as early as age 9, has not been demonstrated to be either effective at preventing cervical cancer nor safe because of the aluminum adjuvants and everything else. So there's a lot of controversy around HPV and cervical cancer, and even cervical cancer screening methods along with this vaccine. What do I do? Should I get it? Should I not get it? Should my little girls get this vaccine? And so, given the sort of swirling pool of information and misinformation out there, I went deep as well. And Mimi and I teamed up in order to clarify for everybody out there the realities around what HPV and cervical cancer screening looks like, what can be done while you're waiting for your follow-ups in order to support your immune system to integrate the message of that virus and avoid any abnormal cells developing, and hopefully avoid painful biopsies, or even worse, LEEP procedures, cold knife comb procedures, and of course, worst case scenario, cervical cancer. There's so much that's in your power. Your doctors, your practitioners probably aren't maybe educated or incentivized to share all of that information, but we're going to do that through this course, as well as all of the realities around vaccines, especially Gardasil 9. We look at data from the United States and elsewhere in the world. We speak to attorneys who are litigating on this topic around Gardasil 9. What you can expect from the course is around 90 lessons, self-guided. And we're going to also offer monthly calls for 6 months after you enroll with me and Mimi, where we're going to be able to answer all of your questions and provide you with that support that perhaps you aren't getting from the healthcare professionals that you've entrusted your cervical cancer screening and your well woman care. So we get into HPV, we get into cervical cancer screening, we get into the immune system, vaccines, viruses. It's everything you wanted to know about any of those topics. Go to the link in the show notes and you'll find your way to book an enrollment call, and we'll get you enrolled right there. We're going to be enrolling in October. I hope to see you there.
Yeah, so I think one of first, I love Lisa Hendricks and Jack. I got to
She's
interview her
amazing.
for my
Yeah,
podcast, like, years ago. Phenomenal, like an encyclopedia.
she's great.
But progesterone would be, like, the first thing I'm thinking of, and
Okay.
so, often when you're not getting the results that you want, when it comes to seeing the clear raw egg white, it's a progesterone deficiency, in my opinion, what I've noticed. A lot of other people can notice other things. What I've noticed is when I tell my clients, hey, I want you to start increasing your progesterone increasing food intake. And then I give them a list. They're more often than not seeing changes within 1 to 2 cycles. More often it's 2 cycles, and that's just because of how long it takes to make
Right.
the egg.
Right,
So,
right.
I would go first to that. The next thing I would do is, like, also consider how long they've been off of hormonal birth control if they were ever on it, and
Mm.
then also factor in what's changed in their life.
Yeah.
So, I have clients who will come to me and say, like, "Okay, I'm struggling. This is what's happened." And before they go any further, I say, "How's your life changed in the last 90 days?" Because that will tell me exactly what I need to look for. The life change within 90 days, because the period I experience today is a result of my life 90 days ago.
That's right.
It's the
Mm.
same thing. Also, if you can hear my puppy screaming, he's having a tantrum, just so you know.
It's
Um,
okay.
okay, I don't know if you can hear him or not, but
I heard, like, a
uh,
little squeak, but I don't know if we heard him in his full glory.
it's fine. He's gonna keep squeaking. He'll be okay. But that is where I would go first is progesterone and really trying to increase those progesterone levels naturally, and supporting it. And I just pulled up the document on my computer. I'm gonna rattle this off. So everybody get your phone out because I am an educator. Okay. Let's get into this. Avocado, salmon, coconut, Brazil nuts, eggs, lentils, spinach, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, and turmeric. That is the list that I give to my clients. That is I'm gonna recommend that to anybody. If you have an allergy and intolerance, please do yourself a favor and Google alternatives. Thank you for coming to my
Yeah.
TED Talk.
You mentioned 2 seeds there, so let's
Yeah,
actually kind of pivot a little bit. Seed cycling,
I
why
love it.
does this work? You know, everybody's afraid of seed oils and everything, and I'm like, we gotta get you on seed cycling. Go to this company, get these, tablespoon of this, tablespoon of that, like, you're gonna be doing this every cycle until we see some changes, some improvements. Why does this work so well? Like, what's your thought as a functional nutritionist?
Here's the thing. Research will say it's pseudoscience. Women will say it's real. So who do we follow? The science or the women? I'm gonna go with the
I'm
girls.
gonna go with the women, yeah.
I'm gonna go with the girls because the last time we listened to science, there was a lot of kerfuffles happening, and I'll leave it at that. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the reason it works so well is because the different nutrients in the seeds are reacting and responding to our hormone levels. That's what it always comes down to. There is a girl, she's a registered dietitian. Her name is Kate Morton. She created Funget Wellness, which is a seed cycling blend. And as a registered dietitian, she knows a lot more about why it works when it comes to the lignans and or whatever they're called. It's just the fact that you are fueling essentially these hormones and the body is responding to that.
Yeah, Kate has been on the show. She's actually
Oh, I didn't know.
a breath of fresh air. She
I
really
love
is.
Kate.
She
That's my
makes it
girl.
yeah, she makes it very pragmatic. Like, it's very much like, "Hey, listen, just do these things. We got all the other nutrition coming and let's do these 2 things." And I've actually seen some pretty remarkable transformations for people. Cycles becoming a little bit more regular, a little bit less spotting, and a little bit less discharge at the end. So there's something
Mhm.
happening there related to progesterone. They're starting to see a more obvious change in their basal body temperature. They're starting to notice their breasts they're becoming a little more tender around ovulation. Like, some really interesting things that are directly, and like you said, in 2 or 3 cycles, it's like a direct observation that something I'm doing is working. And sometimes that little victory lap is actually what people need in order to continue going to some of the more advanced things. So we'll put a link to Funk It Wellness. Kate, if you're listening, shout outs. You've got some
We
fans
love
over
you.
here. We love you. Um, okay, other question, and maybe we'll wrap up with this one. Endometriosis is
Ooh.
everywhere, and yet we're not seeing it in a lot of even impoverished, sort of underdeveloped, as the maybe who would describe them, nations, including in South Africa. This endometriosis thing seems uniquely Western. Um, Without asking you a vague question where you're gonna inevitably fall into some sort of hole I've created for you, in asking what you think is there, what do you think is causing it? Maybe you can share with me how do you so a person comes to you, they've had, let's say, even laparoscopically diagnosed endometriosis, a big pelvis filled with adhesions. How do you counsel them around maybe how to eat, like just counsel them in general as a health coach as to what they might do before they go and go to the OBGYN clinic who convinces them to get a hysterectomy and all this other stuff, or they go on long-term high dose oral contraception, which might maybe we'll wrap up with oral contraception because that I think fucks a lot of people up, and I don't think that we're doing enough of a great job, anyways, of counseling around it. So, what do you do for somebody who has this chronic pelvic pain, especially with their periods?
The first thing that I do before I even talk to them is I kind of figure out where their pain is in
Yeah,
terms of like on a scale, basically, because there's certain people who respond really well to the lifestyle adjustments that I suggest. And there are some people who love the idea, but they're in so much pain that they actually work against the lifestyle. And that often happens to be the people who will not consider being off of oral contraception, and I have to respect that. So,
yeah,
like, it's one of those things where it's like, this is your choice, and I'm going to respect that choice, but also I am not for you because my zone of genius is are the people who are willing to transition off of
that's right.
hormonal birth control and into the natural lifestyle. Now, with that being said, the next thing I do is I immediately recommend a PMS and period support supplement called Semaine. I love Lar, Kath, and Matt. These are the people who created Semaine.
How do you spell
And
that? Main for people listening.
Semaine, Semaine, PMS and period support supplement. I wish I had some sitting next to me. I have all my supplements organized now. But they created a phenomenal anti-inflammatory supplement that's actually clinically proven to work, and
Wow.
2 of the 3 founders, Lar and Kath, actually have endometriosis, and Matt is Lar's husband, who is a wizard. He is an actual scientist, and so he created this incredible blend, and it actually helps decrease the pain. That is the second thing I do. Once I know you're okay adjusting the lifestyle, I then say, please take this because that helps to mitigate pain in the moment.
Yeah.
From there, we target nutrition. From there, we target stress. I don't even get into the movement portion because I understand that often when you are in chronic pain, your stress levels are going to be much higher because you're stressed about your pain. So I have to figure out what you're doing in your life and how that's going to help you. When it comes to nutrition, pretty much everybody's on an anti inflammatory diet across the board. And that's because inflammation makes your pain worse. We don't want to feed anything and make things worse, right? And I also love to make sure people are on a really good probiotic. I recommend the seed probiotic. I don't know what you recommend, but it's a pre and probiotic that I've just found works incredibly well. And
Yeah.
so that is what I recommend to people on endometriosis. Like, because with endo, I want people to live aligned with their menstrual cycle. But if your cycle is coming way more frequently and it's way heavier, you're not you're not going through the phases of the cycle with me. What you want is your pain alleviated, and I can respect that. Once we've alleviated the pain or figured out how to manage it, then we get into those lifestyle changes
Yeah.
and adjustments. And I've also noticed that trauma, I'm very trauma informed. And so, with that training, I've also learned that a lot of my clients have to do work deeper than just the health, nutrition, fitness, movement, hormone stuff that I do. And so I like to refer them to whoever is going to help them get through their trauma because sometimes that can be triggering, and I can't always be the person to do everything. So I like to make sure that they are getting support with the trauma that often they're holding in the womb space, um, and go from there. Does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah, well, the beautiful part about your response is that there's not a one size fits all thing. People reach out to me on Instagram all the time and they're like, "Hey, what's a natural remedy for this?" Because that's what they think holistic health is. And um, it is natural, yeah, but there's actually far more to this. It's far more complex, including what you mentioned. This, what's the story you're bringing into this conversation? I actually had recently had a client who's endometriosis. So she's a dancer. Like she had danced her whole life. She does salsa, she does contemporary, she does jazz, and she's now in her 30s. They want to get pregnant in the future, but she's developed over the past year, year and a half, this horrific, menstrual pain around the menstrual cycle, let's say. It's not all the time. It's not even just like with intercourse or with defecation, which is kind of common for some of the more advanced endometriosis cases. She's like, "Man, this is new to me. I've had pretty clean bill of health, and now suddenly I'm like really in a lot of pain around my periods." And I asked her, like, "What changed a year and a half ago?" She was like, "Well, I stopped dancing." And I was like, "Bam, like that's a part of this as well." In fact, actually not identifying and not feeling yourself so much. It's almost like this endometriosis rages out of nowhere, like demanding some attention. And so there's so many non-physical things that go into play, but also
Mhm.
what I want to comment on is the acute treatment of something similar to like HPV or abnormal paps. Let's get you on Immune Intel. Let's get that immune system thing figured out, and then let's start looking at some of the lasting effects. That's why our Clear and Free program has been so successful, and that's really kind of what we want to honor, is that there is an acute part of this to make sure you're at least comfortable enough to engage with other changes. And
Mhm.
fixing this by putting you on birth control or something is not a fix at all. It's just silencing the symptoms. So,
Birth control.
um, what'd you say?
I said birth control, bullshit.
No,
You know,
that's the last topic we're gonna get into, but go ahead. I wanna,
before we roll into that, I do wanna say
yeah.
something. If you are currently somebody dealing with endometriosis and you have had a massive life change where it's impacting how you personally feel, like your sense of personal power, your sense of purpose, it'd be very interesting for you to do some work on that, because one of the things I've learned in the immense amount of trial and error, but studying, like constant learning, is our chakra systems.
Mm,
Whatever is happening at this energetic level is physically manifesting itself. And I know people love to roll their eyes when there's people like me talking like this, but y'all, hear me
mm.
when I say this. Any client that I have had, we have had to work on the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus chakras.
Preach.
Doing work there has changed people's periods. When I personally accepted myself, my purpose, my calling, and then actually began to work in it instead of hiding it, my gift made room for me and my period was less painful. I can't make this up.
Yeah,
Okay. And I think we need to hear somebody say that that looks like me, but also is talking to someone like you. I think we need to hear somebody say that, because it's like you don't hear it enough.
yeah.
It's not a woo-woo thing. Traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, holistic health and wellness, bioregulatory,
Homeopathy.
all of these things, this is not a game. If you see chakra systems in one practice, I can almost guarantee you're going to see them in another ancient medicine practice or wellness practice. So in traditional Chinese medicine, we're talking meridians,
Yeah,
right? We're talking acupressure, all those things. That's the chakra system. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I just think that if you still can't figure it out, you still don't have answers, work with those lower chakras and get in your body, feel safe in your body, heal that trauma, find your sense of purpose again, and then boom, you're going to start seeing different results. Now, on to birth control. right?
Yeah,
That's where you wanna go?
we will, yeah, we will, and actually, this is tied into the birth control conversation. There is a number of more recent data that's coming out that
Mhm,
actually, uh, confirms or validates an observation that I had, made when I was in my OB/GYN residency training, which was that women with endometriosis also tend to have an autoimmune condition. And I started wondering, is endometriosis an autoimmune condition? This is an association, but what is it? And it all seems to be related to some degree of immune dysregulation. So, what's really, really interesting about that is number one, that means we can fix it without
mhm,
suppressing your ovaries and putting you in iatrogenic menopause. The other then question is if it took years to develop this, it's going to also take some time to get you back in order. But already, if endometriosis is developing, there's also this question around like, why is the body turning on itself? Right? It can't just be a deficiency in certain nutrients and everything else. Maybe there's actually more to it, which is exactly what you're talking about. So this woman who isn't dancing anymore, it became clear to me. I was just asking her some like little questions here and there. And she was like, there was a sense that she had actually lost her identity.
mhm.
And because she identified so closely with being a dancer, and now she was in a new relationship as well, and she didn't have time for dancing anymore. So not only is she not feeling herself, which is what is required for you to dance in the way that she dances, or really for anybody to dance. Like us white people, like we don't really know how to dance because we're not willing to feel the
Is
music.
that why y'all do that, like, weird
Yeah, yeah,
little
yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's it. Like we don't bend our knees, we just kind of
there's
bounce
no
around,
bend of the knee.
No bend of the
Even if it
knees,
is,
no
it's
move of
like,
the
oh.
shoulders. Yeah, it's really rigid, right? Because we
Yeah,
don't let
yeah.
ourselves feel, we don't let ourselves groove and open and all of this. And so she wasn't doing that anymore. And my suggestion to her was, don't pay me to work with me. Let's just get you dancing again. And let's start expressing again. There's our second chakra. Let's start re-identifying because right now you're kind of lost and your immune system is no longer able to distinguish friend from foe. And that's why it's attacking
Mm,
you. So there's plenty more elements that we can unpack here. And in this conversation around endometriosis, I'm so grateful that we're going beyond let's just suppress the ovaries, which is the next topic of our conversation. Why do you say birth control is bullshit? You're not a feminist, I guess. You don't care about the many waves of women who have come forth and provided us with reproductive justice through birth control. How dare you?
so let me before I even get started, before we even go off on this tangent, let me be very clear. My intention is to always inform people rather than offend them, but I do not tiptoe around the truth,
Mm,
okay?
mhm.
And the title of feminist is very interesting nowadays, but I am
Sure.
through and through a girl's girl. I am 100% woman. Like, Shania Twain, she's like, man, I feel like a woman. That is me,
Speaks
okay?
to you.
But I am also Shaka Khan, where I'm every woman, right? So I am so upset with the people who say that birth control is liberation. First wave, second wave, third wave feminism. Um, I got some words for the people in charge. Like, come sit down and talk to me. Make it make sense because sexual liberation for women does not begin with contraception.
Right.
It actually begins with informed and empowered education. And there are so many women running around taking hormonal birth control of any kind to manage period problems when really what we need to do as a society is to call forth greater teachers and greater research and education around the menstrual cycle to answer a lot of these questions.
That's right.
I was 24 when I found out. Actually, I was 25 when I found out I had a fertile window. I thought I was fertile all month. 25. I am now 29 and I will not shut up about the phases of the menstrual cycle and ovulation and how you need to make sure that you're exercising a lot of caution during this 5 days prior to ovulation because that is sperm can live in your body for up to 5 days. And that's why accidental pregnancies happen. Nobody told us about this. And then if we're trying to clear our skin, why are we also giving people birth control? If you want to clear your skin, let's start with your gut and get you some
Yeah.
better products. Make it make sense. Like,
Mm,
Nathan, don't do
mm.
that. Like, don't get me started. Okay. It's an uncontrolled science experiment.
Yeah,
And a lot of people don't want to hear people like me say that because it
yeah,
then conflicts with what they believe to be true about Black women, first and foremost. And secondly, it's like, well, why would people do this to us? For their own agenda. I get no joy. I don't get a kickback from teaching people the truth. Really, I really don't.
right,
Like,
right.
this is an act of service. Do I charge for certain services? Yeah, when you ask me to do more work, of course, that's my time, that's my energy. But to straight up just teach you about your menstrual cycle and how to either prevent or promote birth, that is a basic right that every woman should have. And I
Mm,
am definitely the person who there's a playlist on my TikTok literally dedicated to birth control. There's an Instagram highlight dedicated to birth control where you hear me talk about these statistics and the negative correlation, but also the positive ones. I'm still looking for a lot of positives in hormonal birth control, if I'm being honest, still looking for them because I have clear skin. I'm not on hormonal birth control. I have pain free periods. I'm not on birth control. I've never once been pregnant.
mm.
Clearly something is off with what we are being taught and what we're being conditioned to believe, and I just me and pharma, we're not on the same page all the time. I'll leave it at that. Sorry, I needed to get that off my chest.
I think it's a hate-hate relationship. Let's not say all the time. Let's say or let's not say some of the time. I'd say
I
all
really
all the
I
time.
believe that there's a place for Western medicine, and do not get me
Yeah.
wrong. I do believe that it has its place, but I believe we need to explore true healing and wholeness before we're just teaching people to live with a condition. Living with a condition is one of the things that makes me gag because in the
Mm,
West, we're the only society that promotes living with a condition. Like people will look at me like weird because I'm eating kale, but not think that it's weird that they're drinking a shake that
mm,
literally is man made. It's from a
mm.
lab.
Right.
And then you wonder why your body can't do certain things. Like I said, Nathan, don't get me started. Don't get me started. You already got me started. Well, like I said,
I did. I got you started. Yeah,
you're like,
intentionally.
"Man, I should have led with this." It
Well,
just
maybe, yeah, yeah, go
it's
ahead. Go ahead.
frustrating.
Yeah.
It's just so frustrating because, I was not taught about my menstrual cycle. I was put on hormonal birth control because of my mom's trauma. I've got 3 older brothers. My mom has 4 kids, 3 baby daddies, and Imma say it just like my mom would say it, so I'm gonna be very honest with you, right? My mom was looking for her purpose, and it was to be a mother, it was to birth us. I'm the favorite, in case anybody is wondering, I'm the golden child, at
You
least in
are.
my head. My mom would never say that, but I'm going to say it for her. But in hindsight, when I think about it, I went to Planned Parenthood at 18 years old, about 2 weeks before I went to college. And my mom said, "You're getting on birth control." Now I was 18.
Mm,
I could have done my own research, but I just trusted my mom because she's my mom. And so many other women have that story. But we also don't know that you can technically only get pregnant 6 days out of the menstrual cycle. We're told we can get pregnant all month long. We're also not taught what birth control does to the body, how it can prevent the communication between your brain and your ovaries. So you're not actually ovulating, that the period that you're having isn't actually a real period, and that could jeopardize fertility. I don't know what
what the heck was
but
that? It was like a graphic just came up on the screen. That's so weird.
that and
Sorry.
the balloons earlier. I think it's just because I
Yeah,
talk with my hands a lot, but, like,
maybe.
we're also not taught that this could impact our fertility later down the line. We
Yeah,
are not taught these things. So I'm
yeah,
dealing with clients who have been on birth control for 15 years or more, and they're like, "I'm
wild.
ready to get pregnant," and I'm looking at them like, "Okay."
Mm.
Well, let me before we even try to get let me know what your baselines are. Where are you at? How long have you been off birth control? And then it's like, how come we're not talking about the fact that it's a toxin that's literally going into the body?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's call it let me give you, some language that I use. We say hormonal contraception, which is actually pretty confusing because everything you do in your practice is talking about actual hormones. Hormonal contraception is not hormones. These are synthetic neuroendocrine disruptors. These are poisons meant
Mhm.
to shut down your ability to reproduce, which could be
And
really good from a feministic lens. Like, you don't have to get pregnant. However, it's actually confusing the whole conversation because now even OB/GYNs are like, "You still have a period. It's just hormones. It's no different from your other hormones." It's like, these aren't hormones at all, guys.
progestin could never do what progesterone does.
No, it's
Progestin
beautiful
made me feel
progesterone.
I was on birth control and I felt psychotic. Now, remember at the top of the conversation I shared with you, I was weight training, I had gotten on birth control. So I'm slim, slim. Now I'm a little bit bulkier. My body's not moving. And I was very in touch with my body. And I had a meltdown every single month. The moment
Mm,
I stopped taking birth control, I was attracted to different men because my pheromones were no longer shut down.
wow.
I was all of a sudden, like, not as puffy, like, I was pretty much always the same weight, but I wasn't as puffy as I was, and I could think. Progestin could never be progesterone, like,
Never,
never
never,
ever,
never.
like,
Yeah.
I know I'm being dramatic to some of you, but I think it's just to really encourage anybody who is a feminist or wants to have sovereignty over their body, to encourage you to actually learn about your cycle. Now, I understand that if you are living with a really tough condition, such as women with endometriosis who are on hormonal birth control to manage their pain,
Debilitating pain. Yeah,
I
yeah,
can respect why
yeah.
you are on it. And I'm not going to tell you to get off of it, but I am going to say support your body while you're on it. Take a really great probiotic, take a really great prenatal to support what's being depleted from your body.
Amen.
Like, also shout out to you for WeNatal. I found out about them because of you, so thank you.
They're awesome. Yeah, they might be
I know.
coming back as a podcast sponsor because I just love their product.
It's so good. I got some because I was like, "Oh, Mimi's taking this? Okay." And then she said, "You recommended it?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm listening to
Oh,
this." So
hells yeah. Yeah, I, I love finding brands that actually reflect what you just said, which is like, "Hey, we can do these medical things." Thank God we do have pharmaceuticals and surgery and some of these other technologies, but this should not be the default. You shouldn't be slipped into that category at age 15 when you have 0 clue what sex even is, let alone what the
I don't know,
dangers
these
of these
15-year-olds, they're different now.
well, they might be. I
15-year-olds
mean,
now are a little different than
I was just trying to figure out what to do with my penis, let alone getting close to a woman. But, frankly, it was so scary what they taught me in health class that I didn't have sex anyways until I was 18. And it was with a girl that I'm now married to. And we had been
Oh.
together for like 2 or 3 years before we even went down that path because we were both so frightened. And my wife had a very similar experience to you. She was on the pill, or she was on the patch at first and then on the pill, and eventually, by the time we were in college, she was like she wasn't seeing in full technicolor anymore. Like, life just was changed, was not rich. She didn't have that vitality, and sure enough, when she came off of it, her hair got curly again, her skin cleared up, like, everything felt better. So unless you really have to, I mean, there's great reasons to be on birth control. It should not be 20 million or whatever Americans that are being prescribed this a year, as early as age 13. It's really a bigger conversation maybe for another time. So I do appreciate
So
your candor.
You're like, "I was not expecting that," but I
I
wanna say
was,
this.
Berrion. That's why I asked.
Oh, okay. So for the girls who are listening, or even anybody who is listening to this right now who wants to understand birth control, and feminism and that relationship, I encourage you to read the book Eve in Exile. Now, before you go purchase this book, let me give you a quick disclaimer. It is coming from a very conservative author in a very, from what I understand, she's Christian, which I'm totally all about taking what you need and leaving what you don't. But it really helps you understand the different waves of feminism in relationship to birth control specifically. The rest of the book, to each their own. I don't know how people feel. I don't really care. That's a you thing, not a me thing. But if you want to understand kind of that perspective, I would encourage you to read that book.
Eve in Exile and the Restoration of Femininity. Yeah,
Hmm.
that is a very, very big, very complicated conversation, and many, many people who I've had come on the podcast, who I've grown close to over the years, have lent me resources like this. They've recommended it, and it almost always, if it doesn't change my mind, it at least gives me language to talk about it, and I think talking about it is actually we're not even talking about it yet, and we're, and it is important, and I think a lot of women resonate with what you've said. So so thank you, Berrion. You are a treasure. Like, you have so many, you're like a diamond with all these different facets, and you're like an irregularly cut diamond too, so you're like super odd, and that makes you even more beautiful. So thank you for sharing some time with me today. And um people are going to find you at Instagram,
Mhm.
Berrion L. Berry, Berrionlberry. Tell people real quickly what you want them to know about your podcast and about your coaching services.
I think I just want you to know that you're hormonal by nature and empowered by choice. And more than anything, that's what I want you to know. Yes, we are hormonal and it's not a bad thing. It's not. I know society will tell you different, but you get to be empowered in your hormones and feel at home in your body. I would also like you to know that you get to be happy because
Mm.
this health conversation, I know I'm intense, but like somebody's got to do it. But in all honesty, it is a joy to live life, and you get to have joy and happiness on this hormonal health journey and just this journey of life altogether. So that's it. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, Berrien, anytime. And man, I could riff on with you on some of these topics endlessly. So, in the future, when we've got some new breakthroughs, maybe we can get back together on one of our shows, and we'll do some more sharing. I really love this.
For sure. A different podcast swap.
Yeah, right, exactly. Guys, find Berrien's podcast, Happily Hormonal, HORMONEL. She is highly educated. That is an intentional misspelling. And
Yes.
Happily Hormonal, the same spelling.com. Berrien, thank you. Talk to you soon.